that it's very interesting how many crossover subjects we have between your talk and what I'm going to be telling you. And some of the things are things that we cover in the book, and some of the things are what we know we couldn't fit into this particular book, but we are looking for subject matter for our next book, which, since we're all volunteers, and this took a year out of our lives, plus all the years of research we've been doing, this might be somewhere a few years down the line. But if you have ideas for things that you would like in the next book, please let us know. And one of the things, alderdice did come up in this, and we did not have a chance to do a history of the schools in Squirrel Hill. We mentioned them in passing, but I research Pittsburgh Public Schools because I happen to teach for them. So there's quite a lot of things that we had to leave out. Many of the people, we couldn't get into the history of, we couldn't get into a lot of biographies. But this talk is just a sample, it's just an idea of what is in the book. This is the front and back cover. Squirrel Hill, a neighborhood history. And what we wanted to find out was, what makes Squirrel Hill Squirrel Hill? What is it about where we live that makes it our unique neighborhood? These are the pictures that we submitted. These are some of the pictures that we submitted to be considered by the History Press for the cover. And these are the ones that made the cut. And I wanted to talk about them first to give you an idea of why they were chosen for the cover. Every one of them isn't just a picture that shows something. It's pictures that have layers of meaning, layers of history. First, Squirrel Hill happening. I remember them when my kids were little. We went up to Squirrel Hill proper, up to the business district. And this is the happening 90. And here, history repeating itself, this Saturday there will be another happening. It's being resurrected. Second picture, and this one gets the most attention. Brown Mansion being moved up the bluff in 1903. The bluff, this is the bluff if you're down in the waterfront and you look across the river and you see this endless line of bluffs. Well, right about a little bit upstream from the Homestead Grays Bridge, this house sat down on the river bank. And the railroad said, well, we want to expand our tracks. You've got to get rid of the house. We need to tear it down. Well, Sam Brown, as in Brown's Hill, Mary S. Brown Memorial Chapel, Brown family. This was Captain Sam's house, and he said, oh no, you know, I really love this mansion. It's 23 rooms filled with artwork, murals on the wall. I'm saving this house. And he paid the John Eichler Company $40,000 to lift it 168 feet up the bluff. In 1903, it was done by hand. Jackie, just having cribbing, that's the scaffolding, using the rock layers of the bluff. Rock layers around here are horizontal. And they inched this house up, inch by inch, up the bluff, and then rolled it back 500 feet. So that, and every time I cross the Homestead Grays Bridge, I think about that.
It's no longer there.
Well, here's the history. It had a fire. It was rebuilt. You can see it right here. It became the first building of the Jewish Home for the Aged, which had moved from the Hill District in 1933. And that's the next building. But of course now that is all gone, and it is now the Jewish Association on Aging. So when you see that campus, you can think about this long history of what was there before. And there's much more to the story of this mansion, which we cover in one of the chapters of the book. So another picture, this is on the back covers, Murray Avenue and the Manor Theater, 1937. There's a reason that the Manor Theater looks Tudor or Elizabethan. But that's in the book, so I'm not going to tell you now. But if you look at the rest of the picture, you see there are the old cars, there's the trolley tracks. This side of Murray is still pretty residential. And one thing I noticed when we study Squirrel Hill, most of the buildings are still there. Most of the original buildings, they don't get torn down. They either burn down accidentally or they get rehabilitated. I mean, the Guild Theater is a good example. So most of these buildings are still there. They just look a little different. And that's today. Not much different. This house is still here, by the way. It's just hidden. You have to look up to see it. Now, this picture is just a guy getting ready to pump gas. Atlanta gas station, 1958, Richard T. Young, manager. This was located at the northeast corner of Forbes and Shady. But if you remember, there were a lot of gas stations in Squirrel Hill. Almost every corner had gas stations. But they also had, before that, look at all of these car dealerships. Squirrel Hill was the West Liberty Avenue of its day, and there is a reason for that. And the East End, especially Squirrel Hill, was affluent, and it had the highest percentage of automobile ownership in the city at one point. So these gas stations that you remember were a legacy of the car dealerships of a few years before that. Worthington Mansion, we look at the mansions in the book. Squirrel Hill had a lot of mansions, and they met varying fates. The Worthington became Temple Sinai. That was the first building of Temple Sinai. There are 14 chapters in our book, and I'm not going to read those all to you because what we're going to do is just look at one frame each of the chapters. They're written by, there's 3 of our authors are here tonight, plus me, and there's only one who's missing, so this is really great that we're represented here. We start with a chapter that I wrote, Squirrel Hill Today. You have to understand what Squirrel Hill is in order to understand what its past is. And what are the borders? That is a question that's more complicated than it appears at first because people disagree on the borders. So what we decided to do was use the borders that this city said were the official Squirrel Hill borders. And that creates arguments, but that's what we used as the basis for the book. And you can see it looks a little like South America or Africa in its shape. And so I cover Squirrel Hill's borders. I look at the difference between the borders and the 15217 zip code and Squirrel Hill North and South, and then a little bit about Squirrel Hill's main streets. Why were those borders where they are? And it goes back all the way to the Ice Age. So the second chapter takes a look at the geology of Squirrel Hill. In the book, this map shows a little bit better that Squirrel Hill was an island in the Ice Age. So much water was running down from the glacier that stopped at Moraine State Park that the water swirled round and round Squirrel Hill. And this is a picture from Calvary Cemetery. This is 9 Mile Run here. This is, let's see, Braddock, Rankin, Swissvale, Edgewood, Wilkinsburg, goes to Shadyside, Oakland. That's all very, very level. That's because that is this valley that's around Squirrel Hill, and look at the houses. That's where people settled. They didn't settle in Squirrel Hill because Squirrel Hill was a high hill with high slopes, and if you're traveling to town from Virginia or Philadelphia, you're not going to climb a hill if you can go along a nice broad valley. So that is the reason for this, and the reason that Squirrel Hill remained rural long after everything else was settled around here.
Points out the hills on that one? I just realized I couldn't see it in the photo in the book, but I now beginning to understand. Squirrel Hill is the hills.
Yeah, Squirrel Hill right here is an actual hill.
In the picture.
The picture, here's 9 Mile Run,
Yeah.
and Somerset is right about here. This is Homestead, the waterfront.
Okay.
This is Browns Hill Road, that's Riverview. Here you can see the tombstones of Calvary. Browns Hill Road is right here, but you're on top of the hill, so you're not going to see it. But the water level in the Ice Age was this high. So you can follow that hill through Panther Hollow, Junction Hollow, Fern Hollow, Fifth Avenue, that's the upper part. So it's a discrete hill that you can actually make a circuit around. So then we look at the development of Squirrel Hill. That hill is what caused Squirrel Hill to develop the way they did. It did, excuse me. And this chapter, just as a really quick overview of the development of Squirrel Hill from starting in the 1700s, early 1800s, mid 1800s, late 1800s, 1900s, and 2000s. And here's Squirrel Hill today. And here's 2 layers of history. This is one of the oldest log cabins in Pittsburgh. It's the Neal Log House, 1760s. A fountain dedicated to an Indian, Native American Chief Catahacasa, who lived in that era, French and Indian War. But this was built in the early 1900s. And why? Why would they go back to the past to put a monument there in Shenley Park? So that's in the book. So I'm moving on. Those of you who have never seen the mural in the post office, it is a totally, absolutely wonderful, significant work of art, one of Squirrel Hill's true treasures, because it's a New Deal mural. It was painted by Alan Thompson in 1942. Starving artists during the Depression were given commissions by the government to paint murals or make bas-reliefs that had to be public art. So it was in post offices and courthouses. This is the history of Squirrel Hill. It goes all the way from Native American attacks in the 1760s and 70s through the settlement of Squirrel Hill. And then over here is a street scene of Squirrel Hill from about 1942, because Alan Thompson went to Squirrel Hill to paint the mural. He was told to look around, see what you see, talk to people. So you see things like, here's an Orthodox Jew. This is Squirrel Hill. That tells you this is Squirrel Hill. Here, remember the fruit sellers and all the little greengrocers that lined, all the small stores that lined Murray Avenue. Here's Adele's. I know it's very hard to see, but that says Adele's. Here's a trolley. If you go to the post office and you're waiting in that line, because it's not, every time you go to the post office there's like a long line, just take a look at the mural and look at the details. Next chapter, early days of Squirrel Hill. This gets, after those general chapters, we go into more specifics. Early days of Squirrel Hill. Some people think Squirrel Hill started to be developed in the 1900s, but it actually goes back to 1760s. And Turner Cemetery, 3424 Beechwood Boulevard, which is on that busy stretch of Beechwood down between top of Browns Hill Road to Parkway entrance. But there's this quiet little cemetery where a lot of the earliest settlers are buried, including Simon Girty and his half-brother John Turner. And Simon Girty, you'll be hearing more about him in some other talks. He was what was considered a defector. He fought for the British, so he had to leave town. John Turner got the land, established this little graveyard. You can still go there today, stand exactly where people stood in the 1700s. It's an amazing place. Wayne Bossinger wrote the chapter on 9 Mile Run, and I have to say, when I talk to people about the book, this is a chapter that seems to be capturing a lot of attention, a lot of interest. Wayne goes from Native American habitation through the early European settlers, water power, salt works, coal, natural gas, a ferry, Squirrel Hill Vichy water. Mineral water was considered medicinal before antibiotics came along, and there was a wonderful mineral spring that a couple bought and started bottling and selling the water all over Pittsburgh. The luxury resort, Irish Center isn't quite what was envisioned, but imagine Nemacolin, Frick Park, then sewage. You know, sort of we start taking a dive, sewage, slag dump. Since it was a slag dump, it could have been a convenient dumping ground if it weren't for some very concerned citizens. Reclamation and the future. Yes?
Wayne's going to give us a talk on 9 Mile Run.
That's right, yes.
So
Next year, Wayne is he is going to give us, he's going to fill in all the gaps that I just had time to skim over. Dr. Barbara Burston, those of you who know her know she is one of the premier Pittsburgh Jewish historians.
Not from Pittsburgh.
But she knows her stuff. So she wrote the chapter on Squirrel Hill Jewish history. Talks about Squirrel Hill, and this is something that you probably, people who talked today might have well, you talked about the German Jews assimilated, lived mostly in Allegheny City, didn't come to Squirrel Hill till the trolleys came. 1893 was the beginning of Jewish settlement in Squirrel Hill, not till then. And then the Eastern European Jews from the Hill District in the 20s. So Jewish settlement in Squirrel Hill is relatively recent and happened very quickly. Then Michael Ehrman, Squirrel Hill Business District. It's like the centerpiece of the book. Michael talks about how the business district grew and changed over time, and he looked at the forces that created it and changed it and are continuing to change it. He looks at long-term uses, early development, 1930 to 50, and then the Squirrel Hill Fashion Center of 51 to 90, new directions, and then looks at the future. And then he goes into the microcosm of one particular store that has been the anchor of the Squirrel Hill Business District for years, and that is Little Shoes. There's a picture of the store from, it wasn't dated, but it's probably, what, the 30s and the present. Betty Connolly, our other vice president, wrote the chapter on the Watkins community and the Moorfield Apartment Hotel. You know, the Moorfield Apartment Hotel is sort of like the elephant in the room, because you know it's there, you see it every day, but it doesn't register that you have this huge apartment hotel in the middle of Squirrel Hill, because I guess we're just so used to seeing it. But if you think of the waterfront development, this is what Thomas Watkins had in mind. It wasn't just the hotel. It was this 140-some unit Moorfield apartment hotel, and then all of those apartment buildings behind the hotel. They were 11 five-family apartment houses, 6 four-family apartment houses, 24 two-family apartment houses, 8 stores, adjacent building with a dance hall, theater, snack bar, and bowling alley, a 5-story indoor garage, and you know the smokestack, a heating plant for the whole community. And that just begins to cover what's in the chapter about this incredibly visionary project of Thomas Watkins. Squirrel Hill's two great parks, Frick and Shenley. They're the largest parks in Pittsburgh, but that's where the similarity ends. And you can tell by these two pictures. Shenley Park is very manicured. A lot of the park is an artificial landscape that is designed to be beautiful. And then you have Wild Frick Park, which is much more rustic. So, and that's the newest part down by Somerset. You can see the river in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So the story of these two parks is in the chapter on two great parks. And the mansions and estates, as I said when I showed the picture of the Worthington Mansion, there were lots and lots of mansions in Squirrel Hill because it was a place where the wealthy would buy a lot of land and put up country estates. And you have some of them still in existence and others, like the Berry Mansion, which was Chatham University's very first building, bought it from George Berry. Not there anymore. And this is, I think you might recognize that corner of Bacon and Shady, right cat a corner to Beth Shalom. We have not been able to find a picture of the mansion. It must have been incredible, and maybe in the Squirrel Hill News newspapers we will find it, so we're going to look for it. But this really interesting retaining wall is still there, and it looks like it was from a castle. And everything in between. Mansion suffered a variety of fates, and this chapter explores them. Beechwood Boulevard, another chapter by Wayne. Beechwood Boulevard is, it's worthy of historical designation because it was designed to be a specific kind of road, to be a pleasure drive, and Wayne looks at the plan, the route, funding issues, DuPont lawsuit. Yeah, DuPont had a powder mill along the route. Engineering challenges, work conditions, completions, and then a little bit of scandal here with the Paisley fiasco. Development continues, culture clash, events on the boulevard, and Beechwood Boulevard today. That's got to whet your curiosity. And this is a picture of the big cut between Forbes Avenue and Northumberland Street. Remember DuPont with his dynamite? There was a lot of dynamiting done to make Beechwood Boulevard nice and level and wide. A lot of fill also. And finally, the last one is, you might not realize the Squirrel Hill Tunnel is in Squirrel Hill, literally, and so is the Parkway. This chapter explores both the effect on Squirrel Hill and the effect of this interstate highway on building suburbs and bypassing Squirrel Hill. So, and this was both Wayne and I collaborated on this. And that's all. Thank you.
We like to take advantage of our resources. Barbara Burston will be here in December with me to do a talk. Helen will be doing a talk in January, so you have other chances to reach it. But I have a story to finish up the evening. Helen had the concept of this book. She presented it to the board. The board was very skeptical that we could come anywhere close to the time deadlines that Helen had, saying it was just too ambitious. We made it. We owe you a great debt of gratitude. Thank you very much. And now, chairs over there, buy a book on the way out. Thanks for staying a long time. Come to Giant Eagle. I'd like to promise that we won't have a power failure, but let's all pray.